When you have a show about gratitude, you've got to be grateful for your sponsors. And in our life of gratitude, we all have guides. Somebody that guided us through our lives, that made us appreciate those things that we have. And that's why I'm so delighted and so grateful for our sponsor, Life Guides. Life Guides is a peer-to-peer community that helps people navigate through their day-to-day stressors by providing a place of empathy, listening, wisdom, and support with a guide who has walked in your shoes, experiencing the same challenge or life experience as you. A true life guide. And because you're listening to our gratitude podcast, if you go to their website, lifeguides.com/schedule a demo and add the code HEALTHY2021. The code is HEALTHY2021 in the free text box. You'll get 2 months of their services for free. 2 months for free. So sign up, show your team you care, get a life guide, be grateful for those guides in your life, as I am grateful for our sponsor, Life Guides. Hey, welcome to Leading with Gratitude Live. I'm your host, Chester Elton, the Apostle of Appreciation, coming to you from the Gratitude Epicenter of the Universe Summit, New Jersey. We're dual streaming on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube, and we're also dual streaming with our good friend Marshall Goldsmith. Between the two of us, we have just under 2 million followers. So we welcome you to the show today, where it's all brought to you by the wonderful people at the Methods Network. If you're looking for some great production, the guys at Methods are your people. Well, we've got a great guest for you here today. He's my new friend. His name is John Strelecky. The hat will make sense after he takes the screen. But let me tell you just a little bit about our amazing guest, John. John Strelecky is the #1 best-selling inspirational author whose books have helped millions discover and live their life purpose. His titles include The Cafe on the Edge of the World and The Big Five for Life. They've been translated into over 42 languages and sold more than 6 million copies worldwide. They have won Bestseller of the Year awards 5 times, collectively spent more than 800 weeks on bestseller lists, including more than 250 weeks at the #1 spot. The Cafe on the Edge of the World is currently being made into a major motion picture. An adventurer at heart, John often takes extended breaks to travel remote regions of the world. He and his family's journeys have taken them from the jungles of the Amazon to mysterious ancient civilizations in Asia, to the plains of Africa, plus a lot more in between. I'm delighted to welcome to the show my good friend and fellow traveler, John Strelecky. John, welcome to the show. Oh, you're reading a great book, I see.
Chester, how are you? Wow, I was doing some reading because I knew we were gonna talk. Boy, if you haven't read it, you got to check this one out. If you read a book and you get 1-2 major takeaways from it, I think you're doing good. And as you can tell, I got lots of takeaways. So, Leading with Gratitude, everybody. If you haven't read it yet, who's the author? Oh, that's Chester's book. Okay. Anyway, in all seriousness, it is a fantastic book. I really enjoyed it. And I think there's just tons and tons of great tips in there. So congratulations.
Thanks. You're very gracious. And just to return the favor, I've got your book here too, The Big Five for Life. We've had some great sessions along that with our leadership group. Yeah, the whole show is based on leading with gratitude. And so we're always grateful for people like you that give up your time to share your wisdom with our listeners. It's really fun. We have got a lot of questions that come through, and you'll see we've got a really international audience. And so as we get questions in the stream, we're going to go to the Question Command Center in Atlanta, Georgia, and hosted by the lovely and talented Christy Lawrence. So wave to the crowd there. We'll be talking with her soon. So for those of you that are listening, don't hesitate. Put your names in the chat box. We've already got Fernando from Spain, Mohammed from Sadar, and Priya from Washington, D.C. So let's kick things off. First off, John, tell us what is the Big Five for Life? I mean, I've gone through it. You've been a coach for me. Tell me why it's so important for us all to understand what our Big Five for Life are.
Yeah, the Big Five for Life at its core are the 5 things that you most want to do, see, or experience in your lifetime while you're here on this incredible planet. And it's the 5 things so powerful that if you were to do, see, or experience them, that you could say that your life was a success by your own definition of success. So it's not about your your boss, your neighbors, your spouse, anybody but you, really defining for yourself, these are the things that truly matter most to me. And then focusing all your time, your energy, your emotions, and other resources on those 5 things, so that, in those last few moments of your life, hopefully in the very, very far distant future, when you look back, you could say, it was exactly what I wanted it to be.
I love that. I love too that you're a writer, you're a ponderer, you're a traveler. You turned me onto this great travel hat. It's part of this is the Airflow Tilly hat, great for traveling around the world. I love too that you talk to people as fellow travelers, and that's not just like, hey, we've been to Africa together. It's traveling through life. Have I got that right?
Yeah, I really do feel that life truly is an adventure. And so as I was in the process of writing the Big 5 for Life book and tapping into the essence of the main character, Thomas Jarrell, who's a leader that you learn on page 1 that he's just this beloved leader. And then you also learn that he's dying. And so over the course of 240 pages, you come to really love this man and what he stands for and the way he chooses to be. And then he dies, and it's very emotional. And in the context of writing the story, I had it flow through me that he would sign off on his emails, your fellow traveler. And so when the book was done, I started to do that. And because I really do think that this whole adventure of life is quite the traveling journey. And so we're all in this together. And if we can help each other out along the way by sharing things we've learned, then I think that's a great way to spend life.
Yeah, we've got some fellow travelers with us here today as well. I love our gratitude community. We had a wonderful guest last week, and he talked about the fact that he was going in for surgery, for cancer surgery. And immediately in the chat box, people were sending prayers and good wishes. And I love that as a fellow traveler, we're never alone. I mean, we've got Maria joined us from Lima, Peru, and Cheng from the UK, and Edward from Oxford, and Sub Hankar, and I hope I got your name right, Sub Hankar from India. Talk to me a little bit about your writing, because it's not just the Big 5 for Life, but Cafe at the Edge of the World. Your writing and your path to becoming a writer is really an interesting story that I hope you'll share.
Yeah, so you're right. I had no specific plans to be a writer. It wasn't a big dream of mine. It's not something I had thought about. I was working as a management consultant, and I was very well paid. It was a job that I enjoyed. That was actually a default plan to do that, because my original dream in life was to become a pilot. And at the age of 21, after I had fulfilled every obligation you can imagine, instead of including working from the age of 12 on to be able to pay to try and fund that dream, it was all taken away because of something I had no control over. I was diagnosed with a heart condition that is so specialized that it only impacts 1 in every 100,000 people. And it only really matters if you want to be a pilot or an astronaut. So the odds of that, where I probably could have won the lottery 5 times over versus having that be my situation. But it launched me in a different direction. And that is what enabled me to do the things that I do now. But prior to actually writing, I decided to leave everything behind and to go backpack around the world. So I left a very lucrative career. Again, I was well paid. The company was very good. I was very good at what I did, but I just didn't have the heart connection to the job anymore, Chester. And so at the 32 years old, I headed off to do it. Everyone used the word crazy. You just don't do that kind of thing when you're 32 and on a good career track. But I just couldn't see myself doing 10 more years of what I was doing and then being in the spot of the people who I saw who were 10 years older. So I did. Left everything behind, backpacked around the world on $40 a day with my wife. Came back from that experience a very changed man. I looked at the world differently. I looked at what life could look like differently. I looked at a day differently, actually, because when you spent a day in Africa or you've spent a day hiking the far regions of the Great Wall of China, a day takes on a whole new meaning. And when I came back, I had what I call a stream of conscious typing experience, where for 21 days, the story of the cafe on the edge of the world flowed through me. And so here we are 42 languages later, and it's being turned into a movie. I never could have imagined. And I think the big takeaway for me there is sometimes you have to take a step in the direction of the first great adventure, not really knowing where it's going to lead you, but just knowing that that's where you're being called to go, and then great things follow from there.
Yeah, I love that story, the adventure, the travel. I've always told my kids and anyone that'll listen that travel is a great educator. as you experience different cultures and languages and foods. And why is that so important? And I know it's an oft-used phrase, but now more than ever, to expand your horizons and have those experiences. Why does that, and for you certainly did, why does that make people's lives so much more rich?
What was such a turning point for me, Chester? One of the first places I ever traveled, and I talk about this a little bit in the Cafe on the Edge of the World. There's a scene where they're describing sitting on a beach in Costa Rica. And I had been working for 2 years to try and make it as a professional athlete. I was in my late 20s. I was going to school at night, working full time. And I literally thought that every minute of my life was scheduled. And I thought that this was reality. And then I went down to Costa Rica with a buddy of mine, first time I'd ever traveled really internationally. And I saw that there's a whole other world out there. I saw that people live differently, they talk differently, they think differently, their priorities are different, the things that they're grateful for are different. And it just opened, as you said, it opened my realms, my vistas to a whole different version of what life could be like for me if I chose it. It doesn't mean you have to choose it. It doesn't mean you have to go live in Italy or Turkey or Central America somewhere. But if you want to, those options are available. And for me, that takes so much of the stress of life away from me because I don't feel the size of the box shrinking around me. I realize that, wow, it will literally take me 10 or maybe 50 lifetimes to go see everything I want to see in the world. And that's all out there if I choose to go do it.
I think that's such a wonderful insight for our listeners. We do get pigeonholed. We think this is our reality. And, from when we wake up till we go to bed, it's work, and then it's family and it's checking boxes and getting things done. And then you travel, you mentioned Italy. That was a big turning point for me in my life. I was 19 years old and volunteered to be a missionary for my church in southern Italy for 2 years. And I always laugh that when you find that you're going to have to spend 2 years of your life in southern Italy, it's when Jesus loves you. It was, and the experience of learning another language and sampling their food and a different way of life is just so liberating. Anyway, tell us about what's the best part about being an adventurer. And by the way, Edward from Oxford and Nicholas from Ghana, I'm sure you've got some traveling experiences. Put it in the chat box. And listen, you've got a world-class author. His work is going to be made into a movie. If you haven't got questions for him, you're not being an adventurer. So put your questions in the chat box and we'll go to Christy in Atlanta to check those out. But tell us, what's the best part about being an adventurer and a traveler?
I mean, for me, I'm wired that way. So it's very core to the essence of who I am. It's at a cellular level that I want to maximize my minutes. It's interesting. I was just having a conversation before we jumped on this to talk about currency. What is success? And I think that we're trained from an early life to learn that success often is financial. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being rewarded for your contributions in the world. And that's how that happens in our society. But as I've gotten older and as I've traveled more and had different experiences, what I realized, and as I've had kids especially, I realized that the real currency that matters is my minutes. And so how many of my minutes am I spending on the things that I want in the ways that I want with the people that I want? And when you're out there traveling and when you're out there being an adventurer, it just, for me, like I said, connects with me on such a deep cellular level that I realize, wow, this is what makes me happy. To be out there seeing something new. New for me is part of it, and doing something a little bit risky. So I want to be kayaking a river in Peru that is a class 4 river that I've never kayaked before. I want to be out there in the plains of Africa, seeing animals where there is a little bit of risk. There's a little bit of an adrenaline rush, certainly compared to just sitting at my desk at home. So I'm not saying it's for everybody, but I do find in general about 95% of the population, when I ask them, is travel one of your big 5 for life? The answer is yes. And I think maybe just possibly we're hardwired with that knowledge when we're born, that this is a pretty spectacular experience, an opportunity that we've been given. And we want to fulfill that while we're here on the planet.
I love what you just said there about, how you measure and what is real currency, because often we look at years or months or even days. When you break it down to minutes, and that every minute is precious, it's a whole different perspective. Well, listen, we've got a great question from the Question Command Center, the lovely and talented, Christy Lawrence. So Christy, we're going to shoot it to you.
Thank you, Chester. John, we have a question from Shub. He's tuning in from India, and he wants to know, what do you do to get yourself in the mindset to understand the different people, cultures, languages, and religions that you experience while traveling?
Yeah, so for me, because it's funny, because I think there's a perception of American travelers as being somewhat myopic in the way that they approach the rest of the world. But for me, if you have the mindset that, well, I wish this was more like home, then you might as well stay at home, because that's sort of what fits your personality and your energy cycle and what works for you. But when I go abroad, I'm looking for the unique. I'm looking for the different. And so I think right from the get-go, my expectation when I'm looking at how I'm going to spend my time there and the ways I'm going to interact with the people in that country is all about, like, I really want to immerse myself in it. As a matter of fact, to that point, when I did my first trip of backpacking around the world, we learned early on that it was better to go to less countries and spend more time. And so instead of just 2 weeks or 3 weeks in a particular country, I wanted to spend 2 months so I could really get a flavor for the way in which people spent their days on a Saturday. You know, what did they do on the weekends versus a Monday, and all the nuances associated with that. So I just walk in with an open mindset. And again, I love that stuff, so it works for me.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more about spending time. You know, I've been on various cruises where, you know, every day you're in a different port, and you just don't have enough time to really experience the culture and the language and, you know, the rituals of life. That's why I was so grateful to have 2 years in Italy. You know, got proficient in the language and the culture and so on. Listen, the questions are pouring in. So let's go back to Christy, because she's got some great questions around, you know, language and food. So Christy?
So we have a question from Dr. Shambhavi, and he wants to know, what is your practice on experiencing the local food? Do you kind of stay in the tourist areas, or do you like get out and do local food? And tagging on to that, and this is kind of a practical question from Nicholas. He wants to know, how do you manage to afford $40 a day? Like, how do you afford these distant travels?
So the answer to the first question, yeah, I love to be off the grid. And so I don't want to be in the tourist area. If there's a particular experience that's within there, like there's a section of the Great Wall in Beijing maybe, and you want to see that, that's great. But more to me is getting outside of there. And as a matter of fact, this is going back a few years, but there is a section of the Great Wall, which is about 2 hours outside of Beijing, which is spectacular. It is so beautifully remote, and you just get a sense of the experience that is totally different. But I like to be off the grid, and off the grid with food too. I want to be local. I want to be experiencing what somebody who lives in that country eats and where they eat. One of the most, and I'm not a super food guy, but one of the ones that stands out for me, I remember, was in Morocco. My buddy and I were backpacking around Morocco, and just some of the most spectacularly delicious food in these local little restaurants in Morocco. So to me, that's what it's all about. That's when I at least can walk away from that experience and be like, I was really there. I was really in Morocco. I experienced Morocco versus just the touristy part. And the second part of your question, Christy, was, what was it?
Know how you could afford $40 a day if he were going to plan a distant travel to be able to afford such a small budget.
Right. So what's fascinating to me, and I had no clue of this before I headed off on my first big adventure, I didn't realize that in so many places that it's actually quite inexpensive. So I remember in Cambodia, I was traveling through Cambodia with my family and exploring Angkor Wat, which is spectacular ruins. And literally, it was like $1 per meal per person. Bali, when I was there the last time, if you get outside of the tourist area, is very inexpensive. You get a 1 hour massage for $5. So Central America also, I was down in El Salvador and Nicaragua and Honduras over the last few years. Amazing beaches, incredible people, great surfing, and it's very inexpensive. So my strategy is I go to places where there's an experience that I want to have, and your dollar goes a long way, or your euro goes a long way.
It's really interesting. People are flooding the chat boxes with their bucket list, that Edward wants to visit Japan, and Steffi wants to go to Buenos Aires and take a boat ride to Montevideo, and so on. in the era of COVID, when you can't travel, how do you satiate your thirst for travel when kind of you can't travel?
Yeah. So before I forget, if you get to Japan, the person who sent that question, go to the Ramen Noodle Museum. It is absolutely so cool. And if you're at all into business and leadership, it's even more cool. But even if you're just into ramen, it's super cool. And to answer your actual question, for me right now, you're right. I mean, it's very, very difficult to travel, both from a logistics perspective as well as a health perspective. And so my strategy, because people ask me that all the time, they're like, how are you even managing your sanity? Because we know you're an adventure traveler. And so my tactic is, since I can't go macro, I go micro. So I don't eliminate, I just go from macro to micro. And that means that if I can't get on an airplane and fly somewhere where I can jump in a kayak and do a class 4 river in Central America, then I will throw my kayak in the back of my truck and I'll go find a river within a 2-hour drive that I've never been at, and I'll kayak that river. So find ways to do micro if you can't do macro. And I would say in spirit with that is use this opportunity to prepare for launch. There will come a time, hopefully very soon, but hopefully at least in the next 6, 9, 12 months where travel is going to be open again. And so this is a great opportunity to prepare for that launch, spending your time doing your research, asking people what's your favorite destinations, reading up on guidebooks. I love the Lonely Planet guidebook series because there's just tons of good sort of behind the scenes insider insights in those books, and just sort of mapping out, all right, when things have returned to normal and I can get on an airplane and go fly somewhere cool, where am I going to go fly to? And maybe that means budgeting too. You're already starting to plan for your budgets, figuring out how much it's going to cost you, saving your money. But I think about like commuting time, like almost everybody's working from home these days. And so whatever your commute time was is free time. And so that free time, I really encourage everyone to use as preparation for launch.
Excellent. So your books are available on the Amazon. We can get those. If we want to learn more about you, do you have a website you want people to visit?
Sure. I'm available on all social media platforms, including LinkedIn, of course, and certainly on my website, which is my name, johnstrelecky.com.
We were going to run out of time. We've got a few minutes left. You've got to tell the story about the hat and how you converted me to wearing your hat. And secondly, like, how cool is it that your book is being made into a movie? Now, who is going to play you? Is it going to be Brad Pitt or Danny DeVito?
All right. So first about the hat, and then I'll answer your question about the actor. So the hat is truly an amazing story. It is. So I was backpacking around the world in my first adventures. I had a hat that I bought for $2 in Beijing, China on the streets. It worked good, but eventually I wore it all out and I was like, all right, I need a hat. And so I came back. I was in an outdoor outfitter store checking out some gear for kayaks and some other things. And I went to this guy. I said, hey, I need a hat. What do you recommend? And he said, have you ever tried a Tilly? So I've never even heard of a Tilly. And so he hands it to me. And when you look on the inside of it, which I know you were doing at the start, Chester, it literally says in there, it floats, repels rain, ties on, comes with a 4-page owner's manual, and comes with a 100% warranty, lifetime warranty. So I was like, oh, well, how much is it? And I think he said it was like $78. And I was like, whoa, dude, like that's 2 days of traveling around the world for me. And I just paid $2 for my one in China. And he said to me, trust me, if you buy it and you don't like it, bring it back and I will personally buy it back from you. I was like, all right, well, how can I not do that, right? So I buy the hat. I use it for 4 years. I take it to the Amazon. I take it to the jungles of all kinds of cool places. I beat this thing to shreds. And there's a tiny little rip in the seam at the top. I called the company and I said, listen, I feel bad about even saying this because I have totally gotten my money's worth out of this hat. But it says it comes with a lifetime warranty and it's got this little rip. And the lady says, sir, say nothing else. Just please ship the hat back to us. We're going to replace it for you. And she said, what size is it? I was like, I don't know. I've like worn out all the tags. She said, well, do me a favor, ship it back to us and send it priority mail. So Chester, I go to the post office, I get a priority mailbox, I put the hat in there, send it off. It cost me $8 to send it priority mail. This is going back a bunch of years. A week later, I get a brand new hat, the perfect size, the perfect type, and I get a check for $8. I'm a fan for life. This is insane customer service. And people have said to me, John, because I know you talk about the big 5 for life in the context of leadership and business, how can a company make it when they do that? And I say, well, I've been on the cover of probably, 20 or 30 magazines in the last couple of years. And what do you think I'm wearing every time on one of those covers? What do you think I have 10 of in my house, these hats? What do you think I've bought for my family? When you do right by your customers, like, trust me, it all works out good in the end. And Tilly has done an amazing job with their hats. So I'm a fan for life.
Yeah, and I'm the new fan because of you. Okay, quick, the movie, and then we're gonna wrap up here. But that had to be so cool when somebody said, "Hey, we love your book so much, we're gonna make it into a major motion picture."
It is, and I'll tell you why, Chester, because over the years, it has really been the reaction of the fans that has been just so incredibly heartwarming about this. I remember a very super fast story. The very first person ever to read the completed manuscript was an editor of a magazine. And I'd cold called her asking if they would do something in the magazine about me, about the book, etc. Basically, I was so clueless. I didn't have a book. I just had a manuscript. And so I sent the manuscript. I didn't hear anything back. I figured it was a waste of $25 on an ink cartridge. And a week later, I get a phone call from the lady, and she said, "I want to meet you." And so I meet this lady. I've never met her. She's never met me. And the opening words to her that she said to me were, "Your book has changed my life." And that sort of launched everything for that little book. And my hope with the movie is, in the same way that the book changes people's lives in a positive way, is that the movie, with the visuals and the soundtrack and everything else, will really be the kind of experience that people go back to again and again to just get that fantastic, happy feeling in their life.
That's amazing. You know, I love your storytelling ability. I love that you travel the world. I love that you embrace the adventure and diversity. It's just been a delight to get to know you off camera and on camera, and just so grateful to share you with my listeners and people that are tuning in. So listen, we didn't even get into the museum of your life. You've got to buy A Cafe at the Edge of the World. It's a remarkable read. I can't tell you enough. We have a leadership group. We all went through the Big Five for life, and it is life changing. So you've got 30 seconds. What are the 3 things you want people to remember from our conversation today? Go.
Yeah, I would summarize with this. Number 1, the importance of understanding and knowing your Big Five for life. This enables you to have focus, clarity, and to align your resources, whether they're financial, time, energy, or otherwise. Also, you knowing your Big Five for life and sharing with others gives them the greatest chance for someone to help you. People love to help people, but they really love to help people on something important. So that'd be number 1. Number 2, in the midst of all that's going on, if you can't do macro, do micro. It helps keep your energy up, whether it's a YouTube watch every day for 15 minutes, reading something in a book, all because, as I said, for number 3, this is preparation for launch, because this is going to return to normal. You're going to get to go out there doing the things you love. So use this prep time so that when it happens, you're ready to go.
Well, he's our fellow traveler. He's our adventurer. He's a writer, ponderer, traveler. He's the one, the only John Strelecky. Buy his books on Amazon. Visit him at johnstrelecky.com. We ask all our guests one question. What are you grateful for today? In 3 words.
The fact that someone takes out my trash, which is way more than 3 words, but I love on Thursdays it's trash day and someone does that for me.
Excellent. Hey, we've got a little advertisement from our sponsor, our good friends, our publishers. They have, for Leading with Gratitude, it is Harper Business. Alan Mullally said, "I love this book." And of course, the call to action, buy me, buy me, buy me. It's been great to have you on the show, John. Stick around because we're going to chat a little bit afterwards. But next week is Thanksgiving. I want to wish you all, you and your loved ones, a warm and happy Thanksgiving. With COVID out there, be careful. You know, keep the small groups and zoom it out. Next week, our next show will be December 4th. We welcome the wonderful Ann Grady. She's author, consultant, speaker. She'll talk to us about resilience and a sneak peek into her new book, Strong Enough, Choosing Courage, Resilience, and Triumph. You know, we always say, give us 30 minutes. We'll give you great research, great stories, and a great roadmap to a life of gratitude. You know, I want to say thank you to the Question Command Center, Christy Lawrence in Atlanta, Georgia. Wave to the crowd. We love our gratitude community. You know, Brent Klein, who is the world's greatest online producer, doesn't have a camera today. So we're going to just send a little happy out there. You know, we've got a tradition where we kind of dance it out. So, Brent, if you want to pull John and Christy and I, by the way, we are terrible dancers, but John, dance with us at home. We're going to dance it out here. We'll see you every Thursday at 1 o'clock. Leading with Gratitude Live. Be kind, be grateful, be observant. We'll see you next week. I'll see you December 4th. Cheers, everybody.